Hi, everyone. I'm Martin, and I'm working as a product designer at Veriff. So those who don't know what Veriff does is that we are building an online verification service for companies where trust is really important. So those companies usually operate in fintech or mobility industries, and they need to know who are their users on a very personal level. So to bring one example, for example, if you, back in the day, to open a bank account, you had to go to the office, show your ID, and only then you could open the bank account. Fortunately, that's not the case anymore. You can do most of the things online, but something that's very tricky or hard to do online is actually know if the person who says who they are actually who they state they are. So for that, there is some kind of verification service needed. And this is the part we are basically building. So how you can verify users online. So the process goes like this, that the user takes a photos of their face and also from their document, and then we do different checks, and we make sure that the person is who they say they are. We were founded back in 2015, so we're considerably young, but there has happened a lot throughout those years. So about a year ago, I think we were around 20 people. Now we're 200, so in a year, almost like 10 times growth. We did Y Combinator, that's one of the most known seed accelerators, and we have raised around 8 million so far. So, but when Ilya came to me and asked if I could speak about the design, he asked, how to distinguish good design from a great design. And it's quite a tricky topic, because design is very hard to measure. Right? It's visual design is very subjective. Some people might like some things, others. It differs a lot from based on culture background. So it's kind of hard to say what is exactly good design. But before we go to the design and evaluating if it's good or bad, how would you actually say what is design? Anyone? The way something looks, right? Yeah, that's partly true. What's used quite a lot is this Steve Jobs quote, where he says that design is not just what it looks and feels like, but it's how it works. And I think when it comes to product design, this is how we see this. So yes, we build interfaces that should look great, but the core thing is figuring out how it should work. What is the experience the user goes through? So it is about solving a problem, and primarily solving a user problem. So I would put it this way, that design is building intuitive solutions, intuitive in order to make them look clear, look like visually pleasing, but its core thing is really building the solutions. Because good design shouldn't be the goal on its own, but instead the goal should be using design to solve a business or user problems. So in order to look deeper into this, let's look how the products are built. So there is 4 phases when it comes to building the products. It starts from research, then there is design, then there is building the actual product, meaning writing code, and then analyzing and improving. And it goes back to square one, doing the research again about the new problem or new opportunity that you discover, doing design, building it again. But when we split it into 2, there is basically 2 parts. There is this kind of design process, and then there is a building process and improving process. And this first part, usually it's way cheaper to iterate on this phase, meaning that if you make mistakes in the first 2 phases, they take less time and they're cheaper compared with your other phases. And this is also what we consider as a design process. So the research and doing the actual design. And let's dig deeper into this. So design process. I would put this way that design defines what is being built and how it works. And it has also like some smaller steps. Like you still do research, you ideate, you generate ideas, you build prototypes, and then you test them. And when you have got some results from testing, you go back to ideation, build something new, prototype it, and test it again. So this is called design iterations. So when it comes to research, it is really core part of user-centered design. Because first, in order to do something, in order to provide a solution, you need to understand the user. And you need to understand the people who you are designing to. So discovering how and why people behave as they do is really important. And when you do this, when you go on a really like a deep level and have a deep understanding of a user, it also there you will start seeing opportunities, how you could solve those problems. And yeah, there is a saying that thoughtful questions lead to impactful design, and I think it's quite true, because more you dig deeper into it, harder questions you ask, more valuable knowledge you actually gain. And you will also have like a stronger arguments if later in the ideation or prototyping phase you have a solution. You have done a lot of research and you really know why they exist there, it's really easy to explain it to others. But there's also like a little bit trap over there. So let's say that you're building a new feature and a lot of users are saying like a certain thing that we want, this is how we want this feature to work, right? Or they request some feature by themselves. So yeah, as you heard many users complaining about something or requesting something, it feels fairly logical to actually build it, right? But the problem is that those users who request something certain, they might represent very small group of your users, and very small group with certain needs of your users. So it's always smart to validate a lot of things you find from research with data. I think it's very different from companies to companies, but usually you have some kind of like a data analyst or someone who is able to actually gather this data from a database and do some analysis for you. And this way, if you gain the insights from the research, but validate them with the data, you can make sure that you're building something that's useful for larger populations of users, and actually something that they need quite often. And after you have done some research, it's also important to make some conclusions, to kind of summarize your findings. So this could be done by just gathering the research finding as insights, but also I think it's smart at that point to define the main KPIs. So KPIs are key performance indicators, and usually businesses have them set up. So based on the industry and based on the business, it can be how many trial users you have converted to paid plan. It can be for e-commerce, how many people actually have bought the product from a web shop. So all those different things. But if you define them after research, it keeps you really nicely on focus during the design process, because you already know what's the goal with your design. So to summarize this up, key indicators that show quality of research are you have to pick wide enough sample, so all the demographics are presented. Like, for example, people with different age, different gender, different job. You have to do enough interviews to be able to see the trends. So more interviews you do, you start seeing that users request similar things. So those are basically trends. And you also need to be able to combine quantitative and qualitative research, so to make sure that you're building the right thing. After research is done, the next phase will be ideation. And ideation is really about like a creativity and innovating. So you have to, you know the problems, but you don't have a solution. So you need to have to come up with solutions somehow. And my recommendation is that quantity over quality is good when it comes to ideation and generating ideas. I think in this phase, it's really important to like leave all the constraints behind and just think about like all possible solutions and use more this yes and approach rather than saying no to things. But it's pretty hard, coming up with ideas is hard. Sometimes ideas come to us, or we say that ideas come to us, but if someone would say generate like 100 different ideas for a certain problem, it's pretty tricky. So for those, there are many actually ideation methods that can be used. For example, one that's quite known is double diamond, meaning that you first do a little bit research, so you understand the problem a bit better, then you narrow it down to the exact problem you want to solve, then you ideate, generate many ideas, and then you deliver the solution. Or another one is called mashup method. So how this works is that you ideate in 3 different categories. First is technologies. It can be like a telephone, 3D printing, GPS. You just name all the different technologies. Then you name all different human needs, like love, transportation, waking up early in the morning, and so on. And then you ideate on existing services. So you write down like Spotify, Google, Candy Crush, and so on. So, and after you have done this, you have just many kind of keywords. And then your goal is to combine all those keywords and make new ideas out of it. So double diamond and mashup methods are more like simple kind of processes that take maybe a few hours to do. But there is also another approach when it comes to ideation and like iterating really fast. And it's called design sprint. So it started from Google Ventures. They used it as their business innovation, basically, innovation process, where a team who were working on some problem, they were gathering together for 1 week, and they had like a process throughout those, not 5 weeks, sorry, 5 days. They had process throughout those 5 days. So they started with the research, then they did some ideation, then they did some really basic prototyping, and so on, till they have more final solution. And I think like it has 2 really strong benefits. Why run a design sprints? First is that it's very user-centric. So user is always on a center. Like when you research, when you ideate, when you test it, you always get immediate feedback. And second, really strong kind of like benefit why you have it is that you get whole team on board. Meaning that if you kind of like already sit down with your product team and do this design sprint, you're fairly on the same page. What is the idea that you want to build? And people feel more kind of part of the idea and the whole process while doing it. So after you have some ideas, you probably want to try them out, right? But before you can actually start testing, you need something to test. And for this, there is like different ways to prototype things. I think it's smart to think what you would like to test actually before start building the prototypes. Because when you already know like what is the outcome you want to get from testing, you can choose just a better approach how to prototype this certain thing. Because there is so many different like ways to build the prototypes and different fidelity of prototypes. Like if you want to just I don't know, test a simple startup idea, and you have like some views or like some ideas in your mind how this product could look like, you could just use pen and paper and draw it and show it to your friend and get some feedback. But when it comes to testing really complex complex things, you need to build way more. So let's imagine that you need to need to test how your contacts merger would work. And something that will merge contacts means that you have a lot of duplicated contacts in your phone, and duplicated contacts kind of ruin the data quality, meaning that you want to make sure that the person you have there has the the newest number and so on. So you must be able to merge them together somehow. If you would test this with just like a simple clickable prototype that doesn't have any real data in it, then for users it's really hard to relate, because the actions doesn't have much weight. I can merge 10 John Does really easily because I potentially can't lose any data. But if it would be my actual context, then I would probably think way more and consider and analyze every step way more. So for those cases, you might actually need to build a prototype that's using real user data, and you basically build a very simple code-based prototype that you can later throw away. So as I mentioned, you can build prototypes on a very different fidelities or fidelity levels, and here are some of the tools that can be used for it. So when it comes to very basic wireframing and building static or designing static screens, there is a Sketch, there is a Figma, there is Adobe XD. Then kind of next step is to build something that's clickable and has few interactions. There is a Marvel, InVision, and Axure, for example. And then when you're going to go more high fidelity and build more complex interactions, then you could use a Framer principle or a code-based prototype. There's tons of other products, but those are just few examples. So after you have finished the prototype, you need to go to testing, and this is where you actually start learning. So like I said earlier, to define the scope before actually building a prototype, and also the objectives, what you want to get out of prototype is quite, I think, quite good. But if you haven't done this, then you have to definitely do it before actually starting with user tests. So yeah, accomplish what you really want to get out of testing. And it can be that you want to test simple interaction. Then the process is fairly simple. You generate a task, you build a prototype that's where user can do this task, and you measure if they succeed or not. If it's more testing, like if user needs this type of product or this type of feature, you have to be more involved in the testing process and ask actually questions to determine that need. So yeah, before you jump into testing, define also the metrics that will tell you that if you are successful or not with your solution. And this can be time on the task, the success rate, the speed, or expectations matching, meaning that you ask from a user what do you think what will happen if you click this button, and if their expectations match with the actual results, then that is good. And one important thing to do is to not lead users not lead users through the process, but just give them a task and ask them to be as vocal as possible, so you would get all the feedback and thoughts what they have going through the process. There are also some interesting tools for this. For example, this is called Maze Design, and over here you could use your InVision or Marvel prototype. And what you basically do is you enter the link of a prototype, then define what is the kind of the happy flow, or what is kind of the flow you have designed, and then share this with your test group or users you want to test this on. And they will see the task that you have given, and you will later get to report how successful they were during their tests. So here's a short recording. User will have a task to search a friend or send a friend request a header hunt. and here is where they go through, and if they are successful in the test, this means that this is a good solution. So this is what happens basically before a product is built. But there is definitely things that you need to keep eye on as well after the product is being built. So during the building and later, like keep tracking on the results basically. So I think over here it's the same thing, that it's the smartest way how to approach this is to follow the business KPIs. Because the design should kind of solve a problem or solve a problem for a business. Meaning that if you're designing a new flow, how to get more people to sign up for a certain service, then that should be the primarily like KPI that you actually look. And that should be the kind of the way how you evaluate if this design is good or not. So I would say that measuring the impact, not interactions, is important, but make sure you understand how users are actually using your product. So you still need to be able to understand like if they get stuck somewhere, or like what kind of things they click, what kind of things they interact with, because that will give you like more insights like what you can improve in the future. And I think talking with users constantly is also really important, because that's the only way how you can improve our product. Like doing user interviews once a week or something, where you just speak with users and ask about what are their pain points. I think that would also help to kind of plan and define the future of that feature or that product. Yeah, so this is when you kind of know what you are building and when you have some clear insights from research and from data. But sometimes it can happen that the research and data doesn't really tell clearly what is the best solution for this problem. Or you have two different kind of solutions that you think might be equally good. So the way to test it would be to actually set up a A/B test. Basically that compares to different versions that have just like a difference in some small detail. Because otherwise, if you change too much, or those two versions are too different, it might be hard to pinpoint the exact change that made that difference. So yeah, that's something that's also done quite often in a product companies, where there is many different versions of the same page or the same feature in a live, and they're compared with each other to see which one performs the best. So I think that covers the product development part and how to make your design impactful. I think the key takeaway from here is to always don't just set a goal to come up with a good design, but come up with a solution that solves either user or business problem. But now I will also talk a bit more about design at Veriff. So when it comes to design and designers at Veriff, it's not only design we do. So we are very involved in all other kind of teams and all other processes. So for example, we have a very large operations team, and operations is actually a client for us for one product, meaning that if we do user interviews, we actually speak with people internally in our company. It's kind of luxury to have this thing. Usually, users are always outside. But from this collaboration, it's way easier and way faster to build a product, because you always can reach them really fast, and there is a lot of feedback around. But also like other departments like engineering, marketing, and sales. For example, to kind of like be always sync with the sales, we have this every week lunches where we share our like newest like product developments, and also sales gives us some feedback what are like customers or potential customers, what are their needs. So yeah, you learn a lot about like a business, product development, and engineering as a designer as well. And some of the problems that we are currently solving. So as our product is used by very different people and different users, as end users, then we have to build a flow that's really easy to understand, doesn't have too much detail, but on the same way it describes enough, because some part of the process are quite complex or the instructions can be hard to understand. So it's always like this, finding this good balance between giving enough detail, but not making the flow too complex. Then another interesting problem is that we have a quite extensive machine learning team who's building the automation for our product. And machines are good for some tasks, but so is with humans. Humans are also good with some tasks. And often happens that one specific task on our end is split between machine and human. So yeah, and we as designers need to think what is this way of humans understanding what can machine provide to them, and how to build this interaction where some of the information is already provided by some automation. And then the biggest problem that we are solving is how to build a trust in online world. So that's a very core thing of Veriff. We want to make internet more safer place, but that also means that we have to be able to explain ourselves. Because if your brand isn't very well known, it's also hard to trust it. And if the service isn't transparent enough, it's also hard to trust it. So we always work towards this goal, how we can be more transparent and more trustworthy towards our end users. Yeah, but I feel that as designers, we have a lot of impact in the company, and especially defining where the future of this company is. So yeah, I think that's about it. We have a lot of cool jobs available. Check out our career page if you're interested. And there's also my email if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Now for the questions. What to do to become a good designer?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What to do to become a good designer?
I think the main thing really is to kind of get familiar with the process and then start doing it. Like with everything, the experience really matters. So you have to start kind of trying out things, wireframing things, testing them, and just go on from there. Also, actually speaking with people, as you have to speak a lot with users in the future, helps a lot. Even asking what's their everyday problems and going deeper into this. If they, I don't know, get stuck behind the door or they don't understand how door works, then ask a question like why you are assuming that you should pull it, not push. Try to understand all those problems that people are facing every day.
Can you name some website apps which have a really good design, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yeah, I think Stripe has a really nice visual design. I think Wolt user experience is also pretty good. Airbnb, Uber. Let me think. There's definitely some more. I think Notes app also, in general, as it's so simple.
What is the metrics that you use to measure impact?
So you mean in our case, in a Veriff context?
I don't actually know. Can someone specify who asked the question?
In your company and in general also.
Okay, so in our company, in Veriff, we have different product lines. But usually what we look is we consider a lot of time. So we look how much time it takes from end user to finish the verification flow. So that's one of the indicators. Then we look how many times it takes to pass the flow. We look things like how many times they have to retake photos, for example, if the photo quality is bad. So all those things gives us input, basically, that we use in a design. And we're designing towards, the fastest, the most simplest flow where users don't make mistakes. But when it comes to other products, then it just really comes down to the core business, what you have. Like I said, in e-commerce, you want more people to order your products. In SaaS, you want to see, for example, that more people convert from trial to paid plans, or like upgrade their plan, or invite more users. So all those business KPIs really define how you kind of measure if this design is successful or not. And of course, you can have also your kind of own KPIs for like a design. So for example, that there is some kind of design system used in every view and it's consistent and so on. But those are very they don't serve directly the business goals, but they definitely contribute to creating a really good user experience that's consistent.
How many KPIs are there in Veriff? And can you give examples?
I think I cannot give a concrete number because it really depends from the product line that we have, and we have a company-wide ones, and yeah. So.
Who defines or sets the KPIs that you measure?
It's more like a team effort, and usually who are in the team are there someone from a product side, like a head of product or product manager. Then there's definitely a designers involved, engineers, and then sales, business development. So it's kind of group effort, and it usually goes it's very much aligned with the whole business kind of goals, where you want to go as a business. So what industries you want to tackle, maybe you want to build some new products or completely something new.
What's your opinion on so-called dark UX? As an example, a business wants business results or sales, but designers want to do a clean UX.
I think it's always a compromising. There are definitely dark patterns. I don't know. Yeah, many booking sites have quite a lot of dark patterns, for example, right? And they definitely work towards the business goals. But then I think it's ethics question or ethnics question. And I think as a designers, you should really value the ethics. Make sure that you don't actually build those dark patterns in. Because yeah, I kind of agree on this, that it's really not a good user experience. And I think in many cases, there might be better ways how to kind of create same effect.
What steps have you taken to increase trust with your end users?
I think we have become more transparent, towards what we do and what we don't do. So this means that we are more clear in our copywriting, what we actually do with user data. We have tried to actually speak with our customers about this and help to prepare their users entering into our flow. So the thing with Veriff is that it's not like a product on its own. It's basically SDK that's used in other products, meaning that we don't have very good control what happens before our flow and what happens after. So what we can do is we can actually educate our customers, providing them best examples and case studies, how to explain to their users that they have to now go through the Veriff's verification flow, and yeah, how to kind of communicate results back to them. So I think that's what we've been really putting a lot of effort in, and yeah, just making also our brand more known, because that definitely helps or creates more trust towards the end user.
What makes a good design stand out for you?
I think good design, or I would put it this way, that good design doesn't stand out. You don't recognize actually good design because it's like a frictionless process, but you get your problem solved, or whatever you were supposed to do, you were able to do it. So I think the good design is actually the one you don't notice. When it comes to visual design, I think it's really a question of taste, and that's very different.
Do you also use the same design flow for inner products for your manual verification process?
So meaning that if we use the design process also building our internal tools?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of half of our tools are internal. And yeah, we try to follow the same process. So yeah, it's fairly the same, but there's of course a challenge over there is like, sometimes you just don't have ability to update the whole product at once. You have to start kind of cutting this into smaller pieces and work with them. So yeah, I mean, we try to work with everything and improve as much as we can, but then definitely is like sometimes that you have to sacrifice the user experience in some part to just get one piece working really well because of the resources and everything.
Well, I'm out of questions on the side. Questions that they want to ask right now. Oh, wait a second. I'll give you a microphone.
I probably did not hear you, but how do you define impact?
Impact. How I would define impact is that if it has I mean, impact can have a negative effect as well, or you can have a negative impact on something. I would define it that if it actually helps to improve either your user's life or your like business to develop further. So impact is like if you're able to, impact either users or your business with a design.
Anyone else? If not, then thank you very much.
Thank you.